Hey, everybody, welcome to Sex is Medicine. I am your host, Devi Ward Erickson, and I am so delighted to be here with you once again for another enriching and delicious conversation about sexuality, spirituality, pleasure, and personal growth, because these are all intertwined into our human design. I'm so excited to bring an alumni back. My dear friend Mel Cassidy, who is the founder of Radical Relating. Did I say that right? Radical Relating or Radical Relationships? Okay, Radical
Radical
Relating.
relating.
Awesome. I read these things and they get stuck in my head. I never know that they're stuck the right way. So today I'm so excited because we're going to talk about trauma-informed non-monogamy. And oh my God, what a concept. And I can say from personal experience, because I've played in the field of non-monogamy and polyamory, and oh my God, it is a relationship situation that is rife with potential traumas.
Oh yeah.
From all sides. So being able to navigate this with a trauma-informed lens is such potent information. And I'm so grateful to have you share that with all of us so that we can explore this with more grace and healing and ease.
Oh, thank you, Davy. I'm so glad to be here. And I love talking about this topic, and I love talking about anything about trauma-informed approaches with you because I know it's something that we're both so passionate about.
Yeah. So before we dive in, can you give our audience just an idea of where to get a hold of you and what you specialize in?
Yeah, you can find me online, radicalrelationshipcoaching.ca, or find me on Instagram and Facebook at Radical Relating. I post on social media pretty regularly. I have a Twitter. I never look at it, but you can follow that too. But Radical Relating on Instagram and Facebook.
And something I've been loving about your Instagram posts are breaking down some of the terminology and the definitions used in the world of non-monogamy and really shedding light on like what's underneath the surface and what does that mean and reframes and all of that. So I'm just inviting our audience to definitely follow you if you're interested in non-monogamy, because your posts are they're so expansive, mind-opening.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, you've really been enjoying it. That's what gave me the idea to invite you. So let's first define. Let's start with our for blah, 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 blah. I can talk, I promise. Let's start by defining what non-monogamy is for our audience, for any of our listeners who aren't cognizant of what exactly that term means.
So when we're talking about non-monogamy, usually we're talking about consensual non-monogamy. Monogamy is the idea that you have a pair bond that is exclusive for all time. And non-monogamy is anything other than that. So it's a very wide field. It can include things like swinging. It could include polyamory. So there's a lot of different things that can fall under that umbrella of consensual non-monogamy. I tend to specialize in working with polyamory, but I wouldn't say that that's exclusively all the people that I work with.
So when we're talking about non-monogamy and monogamy, we're talking specifically who we share our genitals with.
Yes.
Yes.
Although I think it's worth noting that for some people, if sexuality is not a priority for someone's relational experience, then it's not going to that's not going to their definition of non-monogamy is not necessarily going to conform to the same definition, if that makes sense.
Okay, so let's dig in. What would that look like? So let's say you're in a sexless marriage, and one person is really comfortable not having sex. They don't need it. It's not, maybe they're asexual, maybe they just don't want to go there. And the other person has sexual needs that they would like to have met somewhere. Is that kind of what you're talking about? Like, so the person who's got sexual needs may want to maintain the emotional aspect of the monogamous relationship, but they may need to have genital stimulation elsewhere.
Exactly. So people can be emotionally monogamous, people can be practically monogamous, and they might still be sexually non-monogamous. And by the same count, people might be sexually monogamous, but be emotionally non-monogamous and have lots of close, intimate relationships that don't necessarily include touching each other's genitals for pleasure.
Okay. All right. So, but in this context for this conversation, we're talking specifically about sexually intimate relationships, that may include emotional connection as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So then we know what non-monogamy is. So then let's talk about why it can be traumatizing. I mean, I'm sure we spent the
Where do we
whole hour talking.
start?
Where do we start?
Well, here's the thing. When we pursue monogamy, and this is messaging that we get from day one, is that monogamy is the strategy for safety and security and stability. And so the moment we challenge monogamy, we can our nervous system responds to that, right? It's terrifying. Even if you're exhilarated by it, even if you're like titillated by the possibilities, there is a part of your nervous system that is freaking out and going, oh my God, what if we're about to lose everything? What if I'm letting go of something that's secure and stable and safe? And this is the prime reason that I find that non-monogamy will create trauma for folks, because it is the lack of safety, because we don't know where to anchor into, especially if we don't have a framework for understanding the path of non-monogamy. And I can talk more about that in a bit. But without a map, we don't know where we're going. And without knowing where we're going, how do we know how to tell if we are safe or not? In monogamy, there is an assumption that we know where we're going. I like this person, so of course we're gonna start dating, and then we'll move in together, maybe we'll get married, et cetera, right? There's an implicit understanding of the direction that we're taking. But in non-monogamy, anything could happen. And so the amount of possibilities can be very overwhelming.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that you said without a roadmap, because you're absolutely correct. It is so ingrained from the time we're little girls. I remember when I was like in like 7th grade, and I'd be getting bridal magazines and like fantasizing about my wedding dress with Prince Charming and all the movies and the one and only, the handsome prince. So we're so like, there's going to be one and only one, and they're going to meet all of our needs forever and ever and ever, which is a lot of pressure to put on one person to meet all of your needs and all of your everything needs. And you were entirely correct that there is no adjacent roadmap for how to deal with more than one intimate relationship, how to deal with polyamorous relationships, or other forms of multiple partnership. There are no clear roadmaps available to us in the society. So most people, it seems like, when they enter into the realm of non-monogamy, are literally fumbling around in the dark, just like
pretty much
spaghetti at the walls, and also the thing I see is like back in the days when I used to like play in that realm is that some people's orientation to it, and you and I have discussed this about before, is polyfuckery. It's really about like, how many genitals can I play with without having to actually like be emotionally present and committed and deeply connected. So it sounds, in theory, it's great, if you want to just, play in that realm, but in practical action, it can be deeply traumatizing because of the way that it's managed and handled in some instances.
Well, and I think adding into that is this element that, because our culture is the ways that relationships are dominated in our culture are around patriarchal monogamy. Specifically, which is different from conscious monogamy, but patriarchal monogamy. And the idea is that we are very controlled and limited in the scope of our relationships and our sexual expression. There's a lot of people who are drawn to exploring consensual non-monogamy because it gives them that outlet and that freedom. And I think sometimes what we get is that kid in a candy store effect of like, I've been denied this thing for so long. Now I want to have it all.
Yes.
And there's no support for moderating or titrating that experience.
Yeah.
And so I see people, you have this perfect storm of, a lifelong repression of sexuality and identity and love, coming into a lack of support and roadmap.
Oh, yeah. It's like a clusterfuck.
Yeah. Basically, that's what it is. And I had my own clusterfuck too. I'm not immune from this.
Yeah. I mean, none of us are. That's why we do this work, right? Because we're like, damn, I went to hell and came back. I'm about to show you the way.
Yeah. And what's interesting is there's a lot of folks who've, walked that path of non-monogamy and they found a path through it. And then there's this assumption that this must be the only path. And
Mm.
so they turn around and they want to show people this is my path. And that might work for a lot of folks, right? But I've found that there's no single way of doing non-monogamy that works for everybody because we've all come from different backgrounds. We're all carrying different pre-existing traumas. We've all got our own cultural stuff and intergenerational stuff going on, and we've all got different needs and different paths. And so the way that non-monogamy is actually going to work best for each person is slightly different.
And that sounds like that view is what it really means to have a trauma-informed lens, is that understanding that one size can't fit all, because we, as you said, we're all coming with our own unique mixture of traumas and woundings and cultural things and social things and all of that stuff. So each of us as individuals, we may be able to follow certain paths, but there's going to be different things that arise based on different stimulus because of our uniqueness.
And one of the things that I find happens is, and this doesn't happen all the time, but sometimes when people are sort of still in that new phase of exploring non-monogamy and they start to feel that fear,
Yeah.
and the old wounds are getting poked and prodded, all our unhealthy coping strategies can come to the surface. And sometimes that manifests as behaviors that feel controlling,
Yeah.
because trying to control a situation is one of the ways that we know for creating safety for our nervous systems. So that's
Mhm.
when I'll see people try to create very, unilateral rules in their relationships, or veto power, or
Mhm.
things like that. It's very often because there's some deep fear that's arising, and they don't have better strategies for addressing that fear other than some kind of unilateral control.
I mean, it's a little bit overwhelming talking about it in my mind, because being in intimate monogamous relationship brings up all of your woundings and your attachment traumas and all of that stuff, all the needs that weren't met for you as a child that you want your partner to meet for you. Like I believe that just like all of us need therapy, period, just to like deal with what it was to grow up on this planet, right? And then
Yeah.
particularly in intimate relationship, whether it's speaking specifically with one other person, having support. Like, it's an unrealistic expectation to believe that we're going to be able to navigate intimate relationship, where all of our wounds are going to arise without any support. And I don't think we're meant to, as human
No.
beings. I don't think we're meant to try to navigate shit all on our own. But then when we expand it to having multiple partners and you have multiple traumas
Oh yeah.
interacting, like, oh my god. And then to expect to be able to do that without any support. And I would imagine, because of the state of the world, though this is changing now, I'm guessing, but up until recently, there hasn't been much therapeutic support necessarily for polyamorous relationship structures, because again, it's not something that a lot of people are well versed in.
Yeah, I mean, the American Psychological Association has just in the last few months released guidelines that support therapists for becoming more poly-affirming and working with different relationship structures. And that's amazing. And I'm really hoping that we see those same guidelines adopted in Canada and around the world. But a lot of relationship therapy theory out there is based on maintaining this exclusive coupled dynamic. And there's very little that addresses the positive aspects of non-monogamy, or how to work even within the complexities of a non-monogamous relationship. So what we've seen historically in the last 50 years is that a lot of people exploring non-monogamous relationships who have needed therapy have either felt hesitant to go to therapy because they're afraid that their therapist is going to judge them or pathologize them, Or people go to a therapist and they never talk about this whole aspect of their life.
Yeah. Yeah. So it gets left in the shadows.
Exactly.
It remains disintegrated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's interesting for me is, as a coach, I have some counseling training. But as a coach, I have so many people come to me and I'm like, I think you need a coach, but also you need a counselor.
Yeah.
What we do are different things.
Yeah.
Counselors are there to help do the like reconstructive surgery. As
Yeah.
a coach, I'm more here to help you with the physiotherapy.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, we do need that support. And it's been this very interesting situation in the non-monogamous communities where if we can't access proper therapeutic support, then people are turning to peer support, and everyone's trying to figure this out all at the same time.
Mm.
And so there's been a lot of stumbling.
Yeah. 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 And it also sounds like there's been a lot of abuse, right? I mean, that was my experience early on years ago. Was there was a tremendous amount of gaslighting, a tremendous amount of psychological abuse regarding your unpleasant emotions, right? Regarding those things
Oh
that
yeah.
arise when your trauma is being triggered, and really policing how people are allowed to communicate about that, and whether or not we're allowed to have those emotions at all, whether they're positive or negative or limiting, or any of that stuff. So
Yeah.
it seems like, again, up until recently, that whole field or realm of non-monogamy has also been rife with the potential for psychological abuse and
Yeah.
manipulation.
Oh yeah, I've seen so many people suffering because their partner has told them that they're being too jealous, or that their jealousy is somehow an indicator that they're not polyamorous enough. And I'm like, that's bullshit. Let's just name that what that is. That's bullshit, because jealousy is an emotion that arises when you don't feel safe.
Yes, yes,
It's an
exactly.
indicator of something.
Mm.
Something's missing in this situation. It might be different for different people. It may not be something that you can even get addressed in that moment or in that dynamic, but jealousy and all those other emotions, they are indicators that something's missing in your experience of safety.
Yes, thank you for making that so crystal clear, because I love that. And I apply nonviolent communication, which is every
Yeah.
emotion that we have is an indication of a deeper underlying need. So instead
Yeah.
of trying to push emotions away or override them or avoid them, we embrace them and examine them, and embrace them as messengers, like you said, letting us know that there's something going on that's requesting our attention.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. So there's all kinds of shitty things that can happen with non-monogamy, as we know. What are some positive aspects of having non-monogamous relationships? What are the benefits of this?
Well, for starters, you get to have more diversity of your relationship experience. You get to alleviate that pressure on a single person to be your all in everything. And, for people whose sexual identity involves attraction to multiple genders, that can be an aspect of it too. So there's a lot more diversity that becomes available. The other thing that I don't think gets talked about enough, in monogamy, we look at how we can develop secure attachment with our partner,
Mhm.
but there's a fragility in secure attachment with just one person. And this is something that is very unique to Western culture. If we go outside of Western culture, people don't have secure attachment just with their partner. They have secure attachment with extended family relationships and community relationships. And we don't necessarily have the same context for that in Western culture, but polyamory offers a context in which we get to experience that. We get the possibility of developing secure attachment with multiple partners.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I'm thinking of, as you're saying that, I'm thinking of a friend of mine who's very adverse to monogamy. And, and I've, kind of analyzed him a little bit and be like, oh, that's your childhood trauma, the attachment wound from when you're 5 years old. But what I've seen is his way of dealing with that wound is to have multiple partners. And then when the sexual aspect ends, they become just pure friends. And in this way, I can really see how this is actually a brilliant strategy for him, for ensuring that even when we're no longer having sex, we get to maintain our friendship. We get to maintain that relationship. So there's no loss. And the sex can
Exactly.
come and go. So the relationship isn't rooted or isn't based around the sex. The relationship is actually based around the friendship, and the sex is part of the party or not. But then he gets to maintain and expand his circle of friends by dating people, for a while and having these sexually intimate relationships. And then again, when the sex wants to transition out of it, they still have that friendship or that connection intact.
And when I've seen it work really well is you end up with a community of people.
Yeah.
It's a community of relations, and there is deep, intimate knowing between those people, even if they're not being sexually intimate.
Yeah.
There is a connection, there's an emotional level of intimacy that gets to be maintained. And that emotional intimacy and the way that people can continue to show up with one another, that community building piece is so nourishing. And
Mhm.
I personally feel like it's so vital for us as human beings at this time. And that's not to say we can't experience community if we're monogamous.
Mhm.
But I think that polyamory can be a strategy for creating that community.
And I love that, I love that you talk about consensual non-monogamy and how that can be so individual for each person and for each couple. I'm
Mhm.
thinking about my own life experience because I find that, again, when we talk about just the Western view, it's very rigid. Right, or it can be, the Western view of monogamy can be very rigid and it's like it's in this box and these are the lines and you don't color outside the lines.
Yeah.
Whereas, I would consider my current relationship consensually non-monogamous, but we're choosing consciously to not have sex with other people. And at the same time, we can talk about it. We can, allow attraction to arise in certain circumstances. There may be some kind of, emotional or physical intimacy being expressed in a certain way, but I consider us, well, we're non-monogamous, but we're choosing to be sexually monogamous. But that it's something that's fluid and organic and can change based on
Mhm.
conversation, and it can include being titillated and stimulated by other people.
And it's an empowered choice.
Yeah.
It's not something that you're doing by default or because someone else is dictating to you, this is the script you have to follow. You're making it a conscious choice. And I think that's really beautiful. And where I see a lot of people get to in their journey of non-monogamy is that they get to a place that's similar to that of like, you know what? I've done this work in myself through this journey, and I can have one or two committed partners and remain open to other possibilities, but I don't feel the hunger to
Yeah.
go and pursue them.
Yes, exactly. That's the thing. And if it arises as part of the play, then great. But it's not something that we need to pursue because we're doing this other thing here for now. And it may change. That's what I love about the fluidity of it. It's like the knowing that the circumstances may change and the needs may change as we evolve and grow as human beings. So having that openness to have conversation about what our needs are individually and then what our
Yeah.
needs are in the context of our relationship.
And I
And
think that
that's healthy.
and the spaciousness to have that conversation and to go explore those things if they do come up. I think that's part of the healing potential
Yeah.
of open relationships is that rather than restricting when we feel authentic connection, that we have a framework, that we have the skills, that we've developed those skills and honed our communication and our self-understanding, that we can go and have those connections in a good and healthy way rather than a way that creates drama and chaos and pain.
And reinforces trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So let's talk about somatic safety
Yeah.
as a lived experience.
Hmm.
What is that and how do we get it?
So I define somatics as the connection between mind, body, spirit, and heart. You know, that is the integrated experience. We can look at it in terms of our nervous system and how our nervous system is responding in the moment. You know, our entire nervous system, from our brain to all the lovely sensory nodes in our fingers, everything is geared to create safety, to
Mm.
inform us, are we safe in this moment? And if not, how do we change so that we can be safe? And unfortunately, because we live in a world that is not safe,
Nope.
we tune out from a lot of those signals. We
Mm.
dissociate from a lot of that. And so coming into a somatically safe place in relationship reawakens that awareness. We can work with our senses to create that awareness of somatic safety. So very similar to the practices I know that you teach, you know, working with our five senses, you know, what are the sights, the sounds, the smells, the tastes, the touch. But also it's in the words that we hear. It's in the way that our partners show up. And this is something a lot of people don't understand about attachment theory. You know, your style of attachment can change between relationships because it's a lot about how your partner is showing up for you and how they're meeting you. So that is something that impacts our experience of somatic safety. You know, is our partner speaking our love language? Are they communicating with us in the way that our nervous system understands
Mm.
and responds to? So
Mm.
that is what helps us create that somatic experience of safety.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. I can feel that in my nervous system. And so we talk a lot about in relationships, we talk about recently about secure attachment. So what
Mhm.
is secure attachment? What does that mean? What does that look like?
Quite simply, it means that your loved one can disappear and you're not becoming an anxious wreck and you're not running after them. That you have this inner experience of, I am still safe. Our relationship is still good. They are going to return to me.
Yeah.
And the attachment theory is based on observations that were made of infants when their caregiver left the room and then returned, and the
Mm.
different ways that infants would respond. And over the years, researchers have learned more and more and more about attachment theory. And now there's, you know, people who work in somatics kind of weaving those two together to have a deeper understanding of it. And a lot of us have attachment wounds. You know, the Western way of child rearing,
Childbirthing.
everything is like, we're going to separate you from your caregiver. There is wound after wound after wound. And so we all come into relationship with core wounds from our first relationships, the relationships with our caregivers, whether they were parents, grandparents, adoptive parents, whoever they were. And so we look to heal those through our intimate relationships on an unconscious level, but we can make that conscious.
Mhm. Yeah, so I'm thinking of in terms of secure attachment when you're dating someone and they don't text you back right away.
Yes.
Right? And it's like that, the difference between freaking out, like, oh my God, you didn't text me back for 3 hours. What does that mean? Blah, blah, blah. Or like, oh, they text you back the next day and you're like, yeah, whatever. It's like my husband now, right? I'm like, you know what? Maybe I'll hear from him tomorrow.
Yeah.
I send him a
Or
text.
the other response is they don't text you back and you freeze up and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't, this is not safe. I'm just going to avoid texting them ever.
Exactly. Yes, I'm going to go in the opposite direction. So yeah, it's interesting as we tease this out, like to see how this show has shown up for me personally in relationships, but then just some of the general things that we talk about with relationships, like, girl, he waited 3 hours to text you back, get rid of them, and just some of those rules around dating and how so many of them are rooted in insecure attachment.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and that need for safety.
And then add in polyamory, add in having multiple partners. I mean,
Oh my God.
love is infinite, but time is not.
No.
And I have a partner who he struggles to have enough time for all of his partners. He only has two partners, and it's like, how do you navigate the time management piece.
Yeah.
And how do you make sure that you're there for people if they're going through crisis?
Mhm.
And so there's a lot of juggling that can happen in there.
Yeah.
But the potential is in polyamorous relationships that attachment wounds get triggered with more frequency because your partner may be going away for a date with somebody else every week or
Yeah.
every few days, or maybe you only get to see your partner once or twice a week.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're sharing, conceptually they're sharing deep intimacy with this other person. So it's not like they're going out for a coffee date. They're going out to rub genitals potentially.
Yeah. And that sharing of deep intimacy can
Yeah.
trigger all our abandonment wounds around, am I still secure in this relationship? Am I still safe? What if I'm about to lose
Yeah.
this anchor point of safety?
And it seems like it's really imperative to be very tender in those places. That's why it can be so harmful for those emotions to be dismissed, because they are
Exactly.
these wounds, these deep wounds that are rising to the surface for us to see them so that they can be rectified, so that they
Yeah.
can be healed. So if they're being dismissed or dishonored or, whatever, then that's going to reinforce that pain.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So wow. Okay. So trauma informed relating. There is a formula for this. You talk about the 4 pillars of trauma informed relating. What are those?
So we already talked about one of them, which is safety.
Ooh,
Creating that safety between you and your relationships, and also creating that safety for yourself. Like all of these are things that you can do for yourself, but they're also things you can do actively in your relationship.
mhm.
The second pillar I talk about is resilience. So resilience is this wonderful skill, and I prefer using the word resilience rather than strength, because resilience is about our bounce back.
Mhm.
It's about our ability to go into a scary place and know that we're going to be okay and have the experience of being okay afterwards. So in non-monogamous relationships, this could look like having a titrated experience. So setting time limits on a new experience, or having experiments where you step out of your comfort zone and then return to safety together so that you get to experience. It's kind of like you're working out your heart muscles.
Yeah, and so what comes to mind for that is like maybe like going to swingers parties together and having an agreement that you're not going to necessarily engage with anyone physically, but just being in the environment and watching other people do it. So you're just kind of like testing your limits and dipping your toe in and
Yeah.
exploring, gently and slowly expanding your bandwidth.
That is a perfect example of doing that. And that's one that I recommend for a lot of folks
Mhm.
to, if you have access to a space where there is sexual play happening, to go and just be around that first. Notice what happens in your nervous system when you are in that experience, and then debrief about it, talk about it, integrate it before you go back into that experience. And maybe you're like, hey, maybe let's make out with other people when we're at the next party. And then know that that's the limit that you're going to come back, debrief about that experience. And you can do that whether you're in a relationship with somebody or you're solo. You can go as a solo person and do that and talk about it with your friends, or debrief about it with your therapist.
Mhm.
Another piece of resilience is developing an inventory of what your triggers are and
Ooh.
how to navigate them when they come up. So, going back to that example of taking yourself to a sex party, you're probably going to discover some triggers. You might look around and you may be like, wow, I have more belly rolls than that person. And you have a story about that. Or maybe you discover that there's a particular sex act that brings back some bad memories for you. And you're like, whoa, I had no idea, because I've just managed to avoid that in my monogamous life. So, developing an inventory of your triggers and then figuring out, how do I support myself? How do I resource myself? Or how can my partners help resource me when those triggers come up?
Mhm. That's
Very,
huge.
very
I mean, the
important.
level of self-awareness, like this isn't something to take lightly.
No,
Yeah, like it's like for real. Like you have to be committed to developing self-awareness. You can't just like fuck through this.
no.
Yeah.
I mean, you could, but you would not have as great an experience.
Yeah, you'll leave charnel. things in your wake, debris, yeah, just stuff, unpleasant stuff. So
Be
yeah,
like a bull in a china shop.
yeah, exactly that analogy. My words don't always come out of my mouth the way I want them to sometimes, but yes, you get my idea. So yeah, that's like, yeah, that level of self-awareness, to mindfulness, to notice in the moment, like, oh, I'm in this experience and I'm feeling, and it's the difference from feeling like either neutral or openness and pleasure, and pain or a pinch or a
Yeah.
niggle,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
And that's one of those pieces, going back to the therapy. Like, if you have a therapist or you have a resource of an elder who can sit there with you in a similar way, then they can help you to develop that awareness. They can help give you those reflections and the tools to navigate those.
Yeah.
So that kind of brings us into the third pillar, which is engagement, which is about active engagement. And this is something that we sometimes forget to do in long-term monogamous relationships. We kind of go onto autopilot. And I read something this morning about how routine is is the killer of time, or something like that. Like, if we end up just in the routine again and again and again, we lose the juice.
Yeah.
So engagement is about actively doing things together. So if you're in a relationship with somebody and you're opening up, still make time to do things together. And, if you are feeling agitated or you're feeling that anxiety in your body, doing physical things together, dancing, tidying up the house, working on shared projects. Also, part of engagement is having regular check-ins.
Yeah.
So that process of debriefing about how are you doing? How are you feeling about that? Taking a step back and just listening rather than trying to fix. Just learning how to hold space for what your partner is going through, or your many partners are going through. I think as well, part of engagement is cultivating awareness of your own trauma responses. So, we talked about like developing awareness of your triggers, but what happens? How do you respond when they come up? In what ways do you go into that freeze or that flight, or get agitated and try to fight somebody? Or when do you go into people pleasing mode? And having a dialogue with your partners about how to acknowledge when that is happening.
Yeah. Wow.
So it's not just something that's happening in the unconscious. It's something that you can recognize, like, hey, babe, that conversation we had yesterday, I realized on reflection that I was activated and I was a little bit cagey with you. I was being defensive, and that's why. And I just want to acknowledge that. Or being able to say, like, you know what, my inner child is not feeling heard right now. Can we just focus on that for a minute?
Yeah.
Those kinds of conversations.
Wow. And again, as you're saying this, I'm so mindful of the inner resources that it takes to be able to have those types of conversations and to have that type
Yeah.
of self-awareness. You need training.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You do. You do.
You can't just.
We don't get taught this in high school.
Yeah, exactly. We get taught stuff that's, I can't even remember now. It's completely irrelevant to my current life experience.
Well, we don't get taught how to treat each other kindly in
Yeah,
intimate
exactly.
relationships. This goes back to that patriarchal monogamous paradigm. That paradigm is based on relationships are transactional, and it's about taking and about having more than another person. Whereas as soon as we let go of that patriarchal piece of relating, we need to look at how do we meet each other equally? How do we create relationship agreements that honor everybody's wounds, that honor everybody's needs, where everybody can feel heard, that allow for everyone to feel nourished?
Yeah. It's like egalitarian relationship styles.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that is an art form in itself. And I don't think that it's ever we get to a finite point where it's like, okay, we made these agreements, now we're good. It's more that the journey of making those agreements is ever evolving.
Yeah.
And it's that journey that actually does the self-development piece.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, this idea that we are fluid as human beings. We are evolving, and we as individuals are evolving, and so our relationships are going to evolve as well. And
Yeah.
so to have that type of communication where you're continuously cultivating this ground of what you want your most, juicy, yummy, delicious relationship to look and feel like for both of
Yes.
you as individuals and together as a couple. So yeah, wow. So, I mean, that's the thing I keep coming back to in this conversation is just the void of guidance and support for this relationship exploration,
Mm-hmm.
and the necessity of having support, of having a guide, of having people or a person who is rooted and anchored and has done this work and continues to
Yeah.
do this work. And so this brings us to you,
Well,
because this is your job.
well, first of all, we need to talk about the fourth pillar.
Oh wait,
We
shit! I'm
skipped a
sorry. I got
pillar.
ahead of us. Fourth pillar. I'm all excited. Okay,
So
rewind.
the fourth pillar is related because that's the fourth pillar is healing, which
Oh,
is that doing the inner work. So we create that internal catalog. We start to develop that understanding of ourselves. We step into that stronger relationship with ourselves. Also at the same time, we're working with others. So we talk about triangulation, and triangulation can be a negative thing if we're triangulating, bringing in a third person and just projecting all our drama onto them. But triangulation can be really healthy. So you bring in the support of someone else, whether that is an elder or a therapist or a counselor or a coach or even a community, right? You don't do this journey alone. You have wider networks of support. And with that wider network of support, you get to have multiple positive experiences that help overwrite the impact of the negative ones.
and
So that is,
that's where the healing comes.
yes.
Yeah.
And that's the potential. It's not a guarantee, it's the potential. And these are four pillars in that they all have to work together to hold up that structure of a trauma-informed relationship. Safety, resilience, engagement, and healing. They all work in synergy. And as you said, it is not something you can do alone. It is something that is going to be way easier the more support you have, the more resources you have.
And guidance, because this is, again, as we were saying, uncharted territory.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And the way, media portrays it, like, oh, they do like these shows on polyamory or swingers and whatever. And basically what they're showing is a bunch of dysfunction, right? There are very few models of how to do this in a way that's healthy and functional.
Yep.
Yeah. And so this is the service that you provide. This is what you do. This is your life.
This is my life. That's exactly it. This is what I do. But it's interesting for me to consider, like, how do I situate myself in this reality of non-monogamy today? We don't have many elders
Yeah.
who have done non-monogamy successfully. And in the last few years, as Me Too and more courage has come out for people to call out abusive leaders, some of the leaders that have been there have been named as abusers.
Yeah.
And there is, still waiting for accountability in many situations. And so people who had been well respected, all their work is now being questioned
Yeah.
and re-examined under the light of this new information. And so there's a whole new wave of people like myself who are coaches who, I like to think of it like we're in the trenches. We both have been on our own journey, but we are also studying all the concepts that have helped monogamous relationships and going, how do we apply that into non-monogamy in a healthy way? And so we are kind of situating ourselves in that role of guide
Yeah.
to support people who are like, I don't know where my map is. And my personal approach is, I'm not going to tell you my path. Like I could tell you my path, but my path was mine, and it's not going to necessarily be the same as yours. And I can give you lots of support that comes from my own experience, but I'm also giving lots of support that comes from witnessing and studying the wider experience of what non-monogamous relating is about.
And so you have a program coming up.
I do.
Would you be willing to share that with us?
Yeah. So I created a course called the Monogamy Detox, which I run twice a year, and it is a 6-week online course. But the beautiful thing about it is that it is lifetime access. So the moment you sign up, you're not just signing up for that one round of it. You get to retake it anytime and every time it's offered, whenever you need to dip back into it. And what this course is about is unlearning all that scripting from patriarchal monogamy that we don't even realize it's there.
Mhm.
And that, the patriarchal monogamous scripting is what holds us back from having a trauma-informed approach in our relationships. It sabotages us, even in monogamy, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not allowing for that freedom of choice. It doesn't give that same spaciousness for agency and autonomy. And patriarchal monogamy pulls us away from developing a wider community.
Yes.
So this course is all about developing those skills, figuring out how a trauma-informed relationship is going to work for you. What are the pieces of that puzzle for you? What is your own pathway? And so I like to describe it to people as like you're building your own relationship landscape. This
Mm.
isn't just some kind of narrow, constructed, artificial trajectory. This is looking at what is actually growing in your own garden, what is growing in the land in front of you, and what do you want to cultivate there.
Yeah.
And sometimes when we're cultivating something, we need to do a little bit of remediation to the soil. We need to adjust some things. We need to acknowledge the limitations of what we have. So building a relationship landscape is the path of that you get to explore through this monogamy detox program.
And I love how at the core of it is the trauma-informed approach. So we're detoxing from cultural conditioning and toxins of patriarchy, all those things we're detoxing, but at the core of it is this understanding that we're healing from trauma. And when
Yeah.
we've healed from trauma, that gives us the capacity to relate with health and vitality and openness and joy.
Absolutely. And that journey of healing is an ongoing one,
Yeah.
that and I have students who will come back to the course, for the third or fourth or fifth time, and they're discovering new aspects of their journey, of themselves. They'll go back into something and they'll be like, wow, why is this place still so tender? And we get to dig in to go, okay, there's something else here that's coming up now. And it's been so beautiful to witness the transformations that happen. I have some students who grew up in very religious circumstances, purity culture, like the purity culture is like the extreme of patriarchal monogamy.
Oh my God. Yes.
And they're like, how do I take this thing out of me?
Yeah, it's like a virus.
Yes, it
Yeah.
is. How do I purge this thing that I was indoctrinated with? And they start to find their path in that.
Mm.
And then on the other end of it, I have people who have like been trying to do non-monogamy and had many messy experience after messy experience after messy experience. And they come into the course and then they're like, oh, you know what? I figured out what I actually need is something different.
Yeah.
Maybe I actually don't need non-monogamy. I just want to have monogamy that doesn't feel like I'm trapped in this little box.
Exactly. That's what I was referring to before about my relationship. Is like this, like it's so dualistic, and just like being able to take the walls off and color outside the lines.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
this is it, and everybody's journey is unique and different. And it's been so beautiful to watch the unfolding of that and to watch people, to witness people stepping more boldly into themselves.
So it sounds like this program is wonderful for meeting you wherever you're at in that journey of non-monogamy, whether it's something that you're just starting to explore or something that you've been exploring for a while and haven't had entire success, or maybe you just want to understand more fully and completely.
Absolutely. And we have a community group that we develop in the course. So
Ah,
you get to be paired up with a couple of study buddies. So you get to have regular communication with other people. So you're getting to have more rapport. You're getting to build up your peer support. So
yeah,
it's not just relying on me as a coach. You're building up your community
yeah.
and developing your resources that way too.
And that's a huge piece of trauma-informed care, right? Is that we don't heal in isolation, that yes, we can heal in a coaching kind of relationship, but the more access we have to other forms of emotional support, the better we heal. It's almost like the more that we're seen in our own authenticity and vulnerability, the more rapidly and completely we're able to heal.
That's exactly it. Yeah. When we are witnessed in our truth, there is healing that happens instantly.
Wow. That's so powerful. Yeah. Thank you for being a guide. Thank you for creating a map. Like, seriously, because it is such a bewildering landscape to navigate without any map, as we said, without any direction, without any guidance. And there's a lot of pitfalls. And as you said, there's a lot of, the elders in the community are now being exposed as, not so kosher. So thank you for your integrity and for being a light in the darkness.
I do what I can.
Yeah. Yay. So how can people get their hands on this detox? We will be putting a link under this video and under the posting on the blog, but for those just listening into the car driving and want to check it out on their iPhones right now.
Yeah. So you just head over to monogamydetox.com. And you'll find all the information there. And if you're listening to this recording way later in the distant future, still go to monogamydetox.com because you can sign up for the wait list if the registration isn't open. But go to monogamydetox.com. All the information's there. And I have payment plans and sliding scale available for people who need that.
Beautiful. And when does the program launch?
April 23rd is the first day.
Time to check it out. Listen to the episode, go to the website, sign up. Don't wait too long. So that's awesome. April 23rd. Good. Yay. All right. So anything else you want to share before we sign off tonight?
No, this has been such a delight. You're fantastic, Devi. And thank you for giving space for conversations of this nature.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I love it. I learned so much. Yay. Thank you, Mel. Thank you, audience, once again for tuning in and listening and absorbing all of this wisdom elixir filling our ears yet again. Make sure you tune in next week. We have Victor Waring of I forgot the name of his website, but we're talking about rewilding eros. And so that's going to be another enriching and delicious conversation for all of us to participate in. So stay tuned. Make sure you connect with us on Spotify, iTunes, subscribe, and YouTube, all those things, and follow us at authentictantra.com. Have a good night.